Good evening everybody and welcome to this evening's Bourne Property Show live. Good evening everyone, my name's Lewis Thorogood, Sales Manager, joined by my able assistant Mike Hollenby.
Good evening.
Who you seem to have sporting the same haircut and slightly more starting to morph into me.
Well, what it was, Lewis, is I went into the local hairdressers and I said, I need something sorted out with my hair, I want to look like a celebrity. And they said, there's only one celebrity in Bourne, it's the digital mayor of Bourne, it's Lewis Thorogood. So you're quite right, I've started morphing into you. Two will become one.
Slightly awkward and tad uncomfortable, but anyway. Good evening everybody, great to have everybody back. It was a great show again last week.
It was.
Obviously the live broadcast, great interaction, which was fantastic. One of our best nights actually for kind of overall interaction, so really appreciate that. We want that again this evening. We'll touch on tonight's agenda in a moment. But again, over 1,500 people watched the show last week, which is fantastic. Between the live and the rebroadcast, it really makes what we do worthwhile.
Definitely.
And for as long as the people are watching, we'll continue to produce this, to produce these broadcasts and these shows for you. Not just for tonight, but there's also, I believe, going to be the back catalogue, the series edition, which I think you're going to get into a YouTube channel or something that we can watch back as well.
Yeah, we're just in the process of getting that finished off, so you'll be able to head over to our YouTube channel, Ian Clark. In there will be a playlist, which will be the heading on that will obviously be the Bourne Property Show, and they will have all of the broadcasting episodes that we've had over what will now be nearly 3 months.
I know.
So they'll all be in there. So again, any information that we refer through to in any of the programmes, again, you'll be able to go back over and watch all of those. A nice plug. Thank you, Lewis.
Well, I do try. It's all about product placement. So, Mike, what's tonight's agenda?
So, tonight's agenda, we're going to kick off with a Why I Love Bourne. Again, always very, very popular when we're out on the streets and the businesses of our community. So, we'll pop one of those in for you. Following on from that, we're going to pick up on one of the questions and comments that were put on the show last week from Nicola. So, we're going to talk about how we financially substantiate and qualify viewers and buyers of properties in that process, and how we can eliminate time waster elements on viewings in the marketplace. And from that we'll be going into another Why I Love Bourne, and then we'll finish off with tonight's hot topics, which again we've put it in the post in the heading of tonight's show, which is first time buyers are back in Bourne.
Marvellous.
So who we've got logged in watching us tonight, because we want to see those thumbs up again, we want to see those likes, those comments. Again, last week it really did make a difference to us when we know that you're out there watching. So let's see if any of you...
Well, early doors, obviously people are just pulling up on their driveways. I'm sure everyone's left work early to obviously join us. Paul joins us, Wendy joins us at the moment, a few guys from our Spalding office as well that have joined us. I think they're still working, which is absolutely fantastic. Shows that we go well beyond our closing time. Well, that's the good news.
Interestingly, it was literally the minute before we went on here, you guys were still tying up an offer on a property this evening.
We were.
We were trying to make sure that we got that done, and we're looking at the watches, but ultimately, we're here to get a job done. So
Jamie joins us as well, so good evening, Jamie. So great. Everybody keep liking, commenting, sending us your questions, your comments throughout, and we'll try and answer them, and obviously give you your shout outs as well throughout the evening.
Fantastic. So let's kick off with tonight's first sort of area that we're going to discuss, really. And as I say, this is in reference to one of the comments that we had last week from Nicola, who put in there. In fact, Nicola, thanks again for your involvement last week. Hopefully you're watching again tonight. There were a couple of comments that you put on there, and one of the questions that you put on there was, how will I know if my buyer can afford my house? One of the other things that you put on there as well is that where you were referring through to if you're showing people around the property, you want to make sure that they're not, that time waster element, that they're in a position to proceed, i.e. the house is on the market or they're sold, and also they've got the finances, which is a really, really good point. So we're just going to have a few minutes just talking about this, really. It's difficult as agents to financially qualify a buyer for lots of different reasons, and I'll explain why that was. If you refer to yourselves, if you are looking to contact an estate agent and you want to view a property, you've seen the details on Rightmove, you contact the agent. When you ring up, you're either asking for more information or you want to view the house. Ultimately, that's what you want to happen in that telephone call. Okay. If an agent on that very first conversation says to you, what are you doing about your mortgage? You've got no relationship with that person. You've never spoken to them before. You've never met them. You've never been into the office. So to answer that question and give all your financial details away to that potential purchaser or that agent is quite a difficult thing to do. It's quite an invasive question to start talking about finances. So sometimes it's about the way that you ask that question. So as opposed to saying, are you needing a mortgage and how much do you need, for argument's sake, if you were to ask that question maybe in the light of, so we see the properties on the market at 220,000, how have you arrived at that purchase price for your next move? That's a way of softening in that introduction in regard to, my house is on the market, I think I'm going to sell for this price. My needs are, I need a 4-bedroom, I started looking in the area, that's the sort of price bracket I think I'm going to need to pay. Leading on to that, who've you spoken to in regard to looking at how much that monthly repayment is going to be, and also all the arrangement fees and costs involved. Again, another topic that we spoke about in a couple of broadcasts 2 weeks ago now. So again, it's just about how you actually sort of soften that question up sometimes, because it is really, really important. If you put yourself in the position, obviously, of the vendor of that property, they are going to want to know what position you're in, if they looked at any other properties, is it for a family, when are they looking to move maybe, and are they in a financial position to proceed. The interesting question, though, is when we're having to ask those questions of those homeowners, they often don't like answering those questions. So I think sometimes in the marketplace there has to just be a little bit of tolerance and understanding between, as somebody who's selling their property and somebody who's buying. That person obviously wants to give that information to, somebody who they can trust and maybe start that relationship with. But ultimately, the vendor does want to have some of that information sometimes. So the first part of our process is usually to ask those questions in sometimes a bit more of a softer fashion when we're arranging the viewing. Another good way of then dropping it back into the conversation is once you've got that viewing sort of confirmed, is to go back to the viewer and just say, fantastic news, I've got that viewing arranged for you. This is the situation and the circumstances of our vendor. May I ask, obviously, what your situation is now? Just so I can give a little feedback so that when you're opening the front door, everybody knows, what everybody's position is. Again, you're starting to get that relationship going now, because you've given them what they wanted the viewing, they wanted your help to get that viewing put in place. Maybe now's the next time to just go back to them and say, how are you going to be funding the purchase? Another key point is obviously then on the viewing. Again, if an agent's undertaking the viewings, and again, I know you guys like to undertake the majority of your viewings, we're the salespeople, we're the experts. Again, it's often a question that you can put into the conversation if people are sort of starting to open up a little bit more to you. They've now met with you in person. Sometimes it's an ideal opportunity again just to broach that subject when you start talking about the overall costs in regard to the move in itself. The key point really though is when we get to the offer substantiation stage. So again, anybody who's bought a property will be familiar, obviously, that an agent under due diligence and compliance, and obviously acting by the Estate Agency Act, would need to verify that the purchase is in a financial position to proceed, and also with the Money Laundering Act we have to substantiate and verify to the best of our knowledge with due diligence where the funds of those for that purchase is coming from. So it's really at this point that if you can explain why you're having to get that information, that obviously we are bound by the acts and the legislation that we do require that information along with identification so that we can do our checks and due diligence. It then starts to soften up the process again really, because ultimately in order for you to help them buy that property you're going to need that information. Now if you're an independent agent and you don't have a financial services department, you can often get that information verified by a solicitor or from what we call an agreement in principle or a mortgage promise, some of you will be familiar with. An agent would ask for that information to be sent over to them just so that they can substantiate that again to the best of their knowledge they've got the finances to proceed. As our company, we do have a financial services department through the Mortgage Advice Bureau, and again at that point we'll be looking to make sure that our advisors can qualify and substantiate that they've got the finances. Okay, so they're the main sort of areas and points at which you can go back into. Again, often is the case, a solicitor will obviously wanting to make sure that that person's got the finances, and they'll be checking where they're getting the mortgage from. Interestingly, most of the purchasers will not have met that solicitor, will not have been to their office. They may well have had a quote just sent online, or as it used to be, that quote put in the post. A solicitor asks the question, what you're doing about your finances, where you're getting your mortgage from, what's your lender, what's your rate, where's your deposit coming from. All that information you'll pour over to that person straight away. But again, we started that relationship as an agent, so I think it's often how the agent deals with it really, just to financially substantiate the best we can. And I think a lot of it is just making sure that you get that communication over between the vendor and the purchaser. And again, I think as long as people have got an understanding of why you need that information, it just sets off the tone for the beginning of that relationship really, because that can last then for a period of 3 months or so. And
I would agree about the element of rapport as well. I think that is really important because let's strip everything back. As normal people, just because we're estate agents, if somebody starts asking the question about money, finances, our natural reaction is to close up, very defensive. We don't want to discuss that with you. Understandable, and quite rightly so. So building that rapport and that trust is what we're looking for here, because if we get that trust, they're going to open up to us. We don't want to know your ins and outs of everything. We don't want to know all your life savings. We don't want to know all your salary history. That's not what we're here to do. But if we can get that understanding, it makes it a lot easier. It makes it a lot easier with the process as well. And I also think that when it comes to this, how will I know if my buyer's in the right position and can afford my property or be an ability to proceed, we've got to look at it from two ways as well. As estate agents, we have a contractual obligation to work for our vendors. That is the seller is our client. It is our contractual obligation to look after them and ensure best practice, that we are getting them the best possible price in the marketplace, that we are ensuring that it is the best quality buyer possible within, as you mentioned, the due diligence. But just from a perspective of a buyer's perspective as well, we want to work with the buyer. That's really important. By working with the buyer, we want that ability to be able to say, look, if you provide us the information that we want, and these are the reasons why, it is going to put you in a much better position to get your offer accepted. So, there is a two-way street here.
Definitely.
Yes, the vendor, the seller, is our contractual client. We are duty-bound by them. But people shouldn't necessarily think that we're not trying to help the buyers, because we are. Ultimately, we're here to marry both those sets of people together.
Definitely.
And when that relationship is joined, then we can begin that transaction.
Absolutely, that's a really good point, Lewis, that you've made in there. And again, it's also the case of just normalising it, that this is the process that you'll need to go through. And a responsible agent will be asking those questions of you, and I think the earlier that you start it in that process, the better. But at the same time, say you don't want it ramming down your throat on the very first conversation you've had when you've no relationship with them. So again, I think that's a key point that we both said. Really, it's about that rapport in the relationship. I'm just going to drop in very, very quickly a point on here where people ask us the question often when we're arranging viewers, well, are they on the market at all themselves? Now this has two-edged sword in one respect. Most vendors would obviously like the benefit of a purchaser being on the market and have arranged obviously their finances, but sometimes there's a tendency to consider not doing a viewing for somebody if their property isn't yet on the market. That can often be detrimental, because there are situations where people go out and view properties on the basis that if they like it, they'll then put the house on the market themselves. Those buyers are usually really, really focused and motivated buyers, because they'll often then put their house on the market, sometimes a little bit more market competitively priced, because they want then to be in a position to sell theirs quickly to get their next home. And once they're emotionally attached to their next dream family home, they're more likely to take an offer on their property or get it sold a little bit quicker, or be a little bit more proactive by working with their agent to get that buyer quickly. So I wouldn't always say rule out people who aren't in a position that their property aren't on the market. So just maybe take that into mind a little bit, obviously, when you're talking to your agent, because it is something that could potentially lose you a buyer or two.
Very much so. Very sound advice there, very sound advice. New people watching tonight. Craig joins us. Good evening, Craig. I think I mentioned early on, Jamie joins us tonight. Good evening to Emma, Phil, Kate, your wife's watching.
So too.
Tina as well, so good evening to everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight, really appreciated. The strange part about it is it's obviously not dark yet, so a lot of people are walking past the window, stopping, staring and waving. I don't know if we feel like we're in a zoo or some sort of exhibition, but there's a lot of people standing and watching and wondering really what we're doing. But great to have everybody joining us tonight as always, and really, really good bit of advice there, and I hope that just gives a little bit of detail to why those processes are in place, what should look to be done in the main, should be done as good practice, and I think that's the key. And if good practice is followed, it makes the transactions a lot easier for everybody.
Most definitely. Great. So let's go and drop in one of our I Love Bournes now. So Lewis has been out in the streets again in the community of Bourne. So at this point, let's go over to our first Why I Love Bourne. For those of you who watch the show live, you'll now know that we go away and do all the magic in the background and drop in one of those.
No, you do all the magic in the background.
Do all of
I
that.
go home and go to bed.
Okay. I live and breathe property, what can I say? So yeah, we'll drop one of those in there, and again we'll pop one again at the end of the show a little bit later on tonight. So again, let's go into now our hot topic, which tonight is much more focused again in regard to our local market again in Bourne. So Lewis, what is the exciting news you have for us this evening?
Well, the exciting news really starts at the bottom of the housing ladder.
Okay.
Because like everything, obviously the first-time buyer market is the key to any sort of market, really. It begins by obviously buying those starter homes, so those 1 and 2 bedroom properties, enabling people to then go up to the 3 beds, and maybe their first family homes, and then it kind of builds momentum from there. So without first-time buyers in the main, you haven't really got a housing market.
True.
You need them to get the bottom of the market going and getting moving. And some latest news that we've had come out, because even though we are mid-March, you know, blimey, we're nearly a quarter of the way through the year already. And even with our business, we're looking ahead now to summer. Or even got one eye on autumn. That's how scary and how quick things go. But there's still a lot of data and still a lot of articles coming out about our local area in review of last year. So the interesting bit of news that I found out today and information that was sent through was that in Bourne last year in 2017, it was the highest level of first-time buyers buying in Bourne since 2006.
So that's
11 years ago. 2006, take away 6, 7,
yeah, just work me sums out. Talking about financial substantiation.
That's why I do the fees and everything. So I'll leave that bit to me.
So 11 years.
Yeah, and that's it's also the highest level of first-time buyers taking out their first mortgage, so the highest increase as well since the financial crisis of 2009.
Okay, so what was that magic number of first-time buyers buying in Bourne in 2017?
So 128.
Okay.
So averaging just over 10 first-time buyers a month buying in the Bourne area. Now that does take in the villages as well, so obviously that's not just Bourne the town, obviously that's the PE10 villages, but that's a crazy number if you think about it. You know, over 10 first-time buyers a month buying property in the Bourne marketplace. Okay,
so now let's have a look at maybe the first sort of the first part of our quarter of this year then. So that obviously takes into account last year. Are you finding that there are first-time buyers in the marketplace still this year?
Yeah, very much so. 21% of the sales that we have ongoing in what's called our pipeline, so our ongoing sales, are first-time buyers.
Okay.
And we have found that if I work out an average probably per week, we're probably getting on average 3 to 4 first-time buyers registering a week.
Fantastic. So that again is a good start over to this year, because like you say, if you've got your first-time buyer market, they're buying those properties, they're moving up market again sometimes, or even a sideward move. So again, that is the kickstart to the housing market. So the signs are very promising already for the beginning of this year. Let's talk about the actual position of those first-time buyers then. We say first-time buyers, but where are they? Are they rented? Are they moving out rented? Are they family, coming out of university or education? Who are these first-time buyers?
Well, I think we'll go back to 7 or 8 years ago when I was a lot younger. I weighed a lot less and I was a lot better looking than I am now. I'm not bad now, to be quite frankly. That's it. Yes, I'm mature of age. But if we go back to the financial crisis of 2009, and a lot of homeowners will be able to relate to that, and obviously house prices kind of became a bit turbulent, to say the least, and there was a lot of uncertainty in the market. What we found back then was that a lot of first-time buyers were wanting to buy, but were very uneducated. Okay. So there was a lot of first-time buyers that hadn't thought about saving deposits. The days of the 100% mortgage had gone. So the whole mindset and attitude over the last 6 or 7 years has been having to try and educate them and get people brought back into a stage whereby they're in a position to buy. Okay. So the majority of first-time buyers that we are finding are living at home with parents. You know, that is a large percentage of those are living at home with parents. Whether that's a single person, whether that's boyfriend, girlfriend that are living home with their relevant parents, and they're buying their first home together. We've got a couple of examples of that at the moment.
Okay.
There is a percentage that are in rented because they want their independence. And obviously at the same time, that's one of those situations whereby they've got to manage their day-to-day living, because rented is quite expensive, and we'll touch on that in a minute, and a bit of an impact to that as well. Yeah. But also they are saving their relevant deposits. There are also a percentage that actually mum and dad are helping them out, and this is an ever-growing marketplace. Yeah. Where mum and dad maybe have I don't know, for the sake of the argument, a big family home, and they are selling it, downsizing, taking some of the equity out, and actually gifting a deposit to their son or daughter to be able to buy their first property. That's becoming an ever-increasing trend in the market.
Right, okay. So they're selling, helping out with the deposits for the children, yep. Like. What are those people then doing? Are they sort of downsizing or going then side shifting and going to bungalows more? Or are we seeing a change in regard to what they're doing?
Downsizing in the main. Downsizing in the main. I think with the way that house prices have gone up, especially in the last 18 to 20 months, a lot of people are accruing a lot of equity. If we go back a long time, you know, back in the day of buying a house, you know, I think the mindset was save, save, save. That's how it always used to be. Yeah. I can't remember that, you probably do. But it was all about save, save, save. And that's why there's a lot of parents out there, I'm not saying they're mortgage free, but you know, I've probably got quite smaller mortgages, or in comparison to this day and age, mortgages which can be paid off. They can give a bit of equity to their son or daughter as a deposit, downsize. In the main, they usually take off, in terms of the size of property, the bedroom that they're losing, i.e. their son or daughter's moving out. Yeah. So if they're going from a 4-bed, they'll go down to a 3-bed. If they're going from a 5-bed, they still want the space, so they'll go to a 4-bed. Okay. That's what you find in the main. Okay.
Just going back to one of the points that you made earlier about, obviously, in the past it used to be sort of prevalent that people wanted to get onto that housing market and buy. An interesting fact that I found out by listening to some podcasts even this week. I have quite a drive into work every morning on the way back, so I listen to a lot of podcasts and property-related podcasts. And something that I found really of interest this week was one of the reasons why people used to buy property and get onto the housing market is because it gave you the right to vote, which I don't know whether you knew that.
I didn't actually.
You've been educated this evening, as will our audience. So it used to be one of those things that if you wanted to be entitled to get to vote, you needed to be a landowner. So often that case.
Is this when food stamps and everything were in place as well?
Even before then, Lewis.
Okay,
even before then. We're going back a long way.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, it's interesting that again that the country as a whole, if you wanted your opinion or voice to be heard, as it were, a landowner, property owner, or a dwelling owner gave you that right and ability to vote. So that's where a lot of it started from. And obviously then we had the 80s. And the Thatcher years, which again was about owning your own property, etc. So we have seen over the last sort of 10-15 years a big shift where it's been a lifestyle change going into rented. So I was very keen on obviously just finding out and establishing what was happening with that rental market. Let's just focus on that a little bit. You mentioned something earlier about obviously how it's affected the rental market. Yep. So a lot of people are coming out of rented and going back home to save that deposit. What about in regards to things like investment market and how many sort of properties were being purchased on maybe an investment market? Have you got that sort of information at all on how that's affected it?
From the dialogue and the information that we've been provided, I think the first thing I'd say is that, you know, it is now actually cheaper to own a home than it is to rent. Yeah, you know, and that's a reality. You know, there are mortgages that you can get with the right deposit, and again, on average, you're looking at a 10 to 15% deposit would put you in a really good position as a first-time buyer. Again, that's a lot of saving, but it is a worthwhile exercise. Of course, let's not lose sight that if you're buying a new home, there is obviously the Help to Buy scheme, which can assist with those deposits. Equally, there's the Help to Buy ISA as well, which is there to encourage you to save, because they will, you know, match or contribute a percentage of what you put into that ISA. So that's a great way to encourage first-time buyers to get that mentality of save and you get rewarded. And then the bigger picture is you get your own home. So, go on, sorry.
I'm going to drop in there a little bit as well. Sometimes people, when they've moved out of that rental property and back with parents to save for that deposit, just a little point I'll put in here as well, that a lot of people aren't aware of this, that the Help to Buy scheme is due to finish in 2021. Now that might seem a long way away, but again, if you're planning on saving and you're thinking, well, it's going to take us longer than a year, maybe 2 years, you need to start thinking already about how quickly you can get to that point of saving that deposit. so that again, you don't sort of save the next 2-3 years or so and then miss out on that Help to Buy scheme. So just a little point for me to just drop in there as well, that again, that's under obviously the current government, but the funding and the process is due to finish in 2021, and it's frightening how quickly that'll come around.
We'll touch you back to your earlier question about the effect of the rental market. Last year in Bourne, the buy-to-let market, I should say, the buy-to-let market was a little bit more subdued than it has been of late. And actually, in the Bourne area, and again, 99.9% of first-time buyers will have a mortgage on their first property, unless they're in a really lucky position. If we compare that to buy-to-let buyers having a mortgage on an investment property, only 26 buy-to-let purchases took place in Bourne last year.
Okay,
We'll
go back to those comparisons again, just to narrow those numbers down again. So 26 buy-to-let compared to 128 first-time buyer purchases last year.
And the HM Treasury believe that 30 to 40% of buy-to-let property is bought with a mortgage.
Right. Okay.
So if you look at the fact that 26 properties last year in Bourne were bought with a mortgage as a buy-to-let, the comparison there is quite down. But it's great for the first-time buyer market. And what that has done as well is it has driven prices on two-bedroom properties up. Two-bedroom homes in Bourne at the minute can range anything from 145 up to 160, 165, which is a massive jump from where it's been over previous years. So it's really showing, when we look at the bigger picture of the market, and I think a lot will come out this year with Brexit. I think that will have an effect, in my view, and indeed on the experts' view, about the higher end market. I think a lot of people at the upper end are kind of having a look at kind of what happens with Brexit, what happens with the economy before they decide to downsize or sideways move or take equity out of their property. So I think as the year goes on, the first time buyer market will kind of level off. I think that there's still plenty of them registering. We still need a lot more starter homes to the market,
which again we've spoken about in previous broadcasts as well.
And if I may just interject there, Tina says, she's just commented in, we need more houses for sale in Bourne. At the higher end market, she's put there's lots to choose from with regards to the first time buyers. I'll be honest, I think in terms of supply and demand, great comment, Tina, but in terms of supply and demand, actually, there's not enough for the lower end market at the minute, because there's still a lot of... we've got to remember here, there's two marketplaces which buy those starter homes. First time buyers are fighting with investors. And 9 times out of 10, investors can win the day because they may well offer more because they have more disposable income to put down.
Okay, so hopefully that's answered a lot of the questions that you've been putting in. I've noticed we've got some other comments in there, which again are in the feed. Again, really appreciate everybody's involvement. I think Nicola's been back on again as well. Nicola, thank you for joining us again tonight. Hopefully you heard the comments earlier on in tonight's show in answer to your question. Apologies for my coffee in there.
So Tina, we'll get you a branded coffee mixture as well for next week. Tina obviously says as well, and again, appreciate your comments, Tina, communication is key between the agent and the seller. And I think it goes back to our earlier question of Nicola's that we were answering about, a buyer being able to afford a property and them being in the right position, I should say. And I agree with you that the communication element of it is absolutely key. Quick shout out and good evening as well to Kim, Bev, obviously Nicola joins us as well, so appreciate everybody tuning in tonight.
So hopefully you found tonight's show of interest again. We're going to just pop another Why I Love Bourne in. That's going in now.
Is it? Oh, good. By magic. They're going to say,
So, again, just want to thank everybody for the involvement. Again, it's great now that we're starting to get a lot of regular people watching, a bit of a fan base, some might say. What I'm looking for over the next couple of weeks is maybe one of you guys out there who are in a local business or in the community or just want to get involved in the show. If you want to pop along one evening, if you want us to maybe talk about your experience of the property market, if you've bought, sold, been an investor, if you want to get involved in this show, this is about you and the community. Why don't you come along one Thursday evening? We'd love to have you on board with us. maybe just to do a Q&A session, just find out about what your experience has been in the marketplace, because again, it's all about our local area and our community. So I've just surprised you with that.
We've got enough chairs and space here to
have
we could have a live audience. I'm thinking we get a live audience in for half an hour.
Yeah.
We'll have a green room at the back.
Yeah.
We'll have a selection of sweets and alcoholic beverages. It is after the closing hours, so we're okay. Yeah. And get everybody in and have it as we have a question time.
In-house band.
And we need in-house bands. If anybody knows anybody that can bring a band in as well, or play an instrument, I'm happy to keep it open. Contact us, we'll get you in.
Fantastic. So, again, great. Thanks ever so much indeed for your participation. We will look forward to speaking and seeing and hearing all those comments from you again over the next 7 days or so. But thank you very much.
Indeed, 6:30. Appreciate it. We'll see you this time next week. Good night.